Welcome to FYI. Once again, Barry ZeVAN's my name, and the name of R.T. Rybak is very familiar to people in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're seen all over the world, but for those of you watching here in Minnesota, he was the former mayor, very successful mayor of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it's such a joy to welcome RT to the show.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here because I remember as a kid, I was a big kid, I don't want to age either of us, but watching you on the weather those many years ago, and you really kind of shook things up, which I appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. You are shaking things up now as CEO of the Minneapolis Foundation, and I think a lot of people are not familiar with the fact that there is a Minneapolis Foundation,
right,
although it has a great reputation for the people who know
right,
about foundations. What does the Minneapolis Foundation do?
Well, you know, it's one of those things that when you have an institution like the Minneapolis Foundation, which has been around for 102 years, people don't always understand it all. And when I hear foundation, I think of a group of people with a pot of money who write checks to do nice things, and we do that. But it's more than that because unlike a lot of foundations, Minneapolis Foundation's the second oldest community foundation in the country. And that means that 102 years ago, people said, let's have not only a place where the people at the foundation give away money, but let's have individuals be able to open an account there too. So now there are 1,800 people who have individual accounts to do their charitable work through. And it's a little bit like you have a financial advisor who helps you make the money. We're the financial advisor to help you give away the money, to make sure that it's reputable organizations, and more important, that it's really helping social good. So a few years ago, we used to bring in about $30 million to these accounts, and our donors would put out $30 million a year, and that's a lot. When we hit our 100th anniversary, we went up to $50 million in the door and about $50 million to charities around the region. And last year we hit $76 million in the door.
Oh, wow.
And we're getting a corollary amount out there, and our year ends in April. So it's we're filming this right before April. We're about to end the year, but we're going to do even better than last year.
Oh, congratulations.
So the amount of money coming into the foundation has doubled over the past 4 years. But the good news is the amount of money going out to do good work in the community has doubled. I don't get to control all that money. I get to inspire donors. We have relationships with them, we work with them, so we try to bring them together. And we also have a really good team there. We've had great people there for many years, and then I've added a few really, really great players. Ellen Luger, who used to run the General Mills Foundation, Shonda Smith-Baker, who used to lead Pillsbury United Communities, which has done so much for communities around the region. Dominic Washington, who used to be at Bush Foundation. You know, this whole group of new people have come in with a really great base of people there. And so together we're doing some pretty big things.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations on the growth.
It's exciting.
Is the parameter that the money that is given from the donors has to stay in Minneapolis?
The money can go anywhere. So let's pretend Barry ZeVAN, with all the money you get paid for this show, decided to open a donor account. Right.
Zero.
Well,
anyway,
let's say you decided to open a donor account. So you'd say, okay, I'll write a check to the foundation, and then you get your charitable donation because we're a nonprofit. But then it sits in an account, and you sit down with our team. They're really great people. They'll sit down with you and say, you know, tell us what you care about. And you'll maybe say, I care about education, or I want to help North Minneapolis, or I care about the environment. And then we'll tell you a bit about what we understand is going out there, but we'll maybe go on visits with you to those charities. We'll say, you know, I know you care about environment and schools. Did you know there's this good program to teach environment in classrooms? Or we may say, you know, Barry's interested in this, but over here, Suzanne is interested in that, and then we'll partner you together. So it's really exciting because, you know, if you think about 1,800 people who are putting out millions of dollars, they're really good people, and some are really rich, some are not. A school teacher in Hopkins who puts money in for scholarships for kids in his class, you know, it's really wonderful, heartwarming sorts of things. So I really feel blessed to be able to work with so many good people.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a really an incredible opportunity.
I would assume, being the second oldest foundation like this in the country, you've really been able to go so deeply into who really needs what.
Well, you know, that's absolutely true. And it's also been exciting to figure out how to really learn about what helps people give more. So for instance, if you think about, for 102 years, there have been people at the Minneapolis Foundation who've worked with individuals like you and their family. We know a lot about how families do charity, and sometimes it's complicated. You may want to do this, your partner wants to do that, your child wants to do that, your in-laws want to do that. You know, it gets complicated, right? So over our 102 years, we've developed a lot of knowledge, and now we have something called the Family Philanthropic Resource Center. And what that's about is helping families we do family meetings for them to how to understand that. We bring families together to talk to each other about what to do. We've also have a really exciting group called Fourth Generation, which are young people in their 20s and 30s who put $250 in a pot, and then each year they choose a charity. And so we're growing the next wave of philanthropy.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think not being solicitous, but really true, they could not have chosen a better CEO than you as former mayor of Minneapolis, and so many incredible things happened under your guidance and under your leadership.
Well, you're kind to say that.
Well, it's true, but
Thank you.
Thank you. So, to me, it's a natural. I mean, the fact that you were mayor, and then all of a sudden this opens up.
Yeah.
You know every nook and cranny of this city.
Well, I know a lot of them, and one of the things that's kind of interesting, Barry, is that people will say, "Well, this is such a big change." It's funny. I'm working on many of the same issues. I'm working on making schools better, improving our environment and the arts, especially trying to maximize the fact that we're an incredibly diverse city and really celebrate and enhance the assets of all. These are all things I worked on as mayor. I'm not doing snow plowing. I'm not doing potholes. Sorry about that. But I am doing schools and kids and work and environment and climate and all those issues. The arts, I get to spend a lot of time in the arts, which makes me real happy. So it's not an appreciably different set of issues. It is different, though, to recognize that you're a partner, you're not running it, which is a lot easier because when I was mayor, a few years in, I kind of came to the conclusion, oh, I get it, I'm not able to do a single thing myself. So you have to have partnerships. So even though I had kind of a fancy title, I had to get people around the table, and that's what I do now.
Wonderful, wonderful. What you've just described, I think some people in high offices these days are recognizing. The ones who,
there are some
who
people
are
in
based
high
in
office,
Washington, D.C.
Yeah, some in high office, I would prefer that they don't get anything done. Actually.
Speaking of politics,
Yeah.
I've been blessed enough to have relationships with a lot of people who did make it way up to the top.
Yeah.
But including President Truman, about which I write in my book. There's a shameless plug, by the way, coming up at the end.
You mean this
that
book?
book?
Yes.
That one. Yeah, we at the end we give a shameless plug.
Oh, good. I already
But
I
thank
did
you.
take care of it.
Now
Thank
we
you.
have a second shameless plug here. Thank you. And people should know, in my opinion, how terribly tough it is to run for office. In my opinion, anyway. I know the hard work. I mean, all the volunteers and all the hours and hours. It's a wonder you even sleep.
Yeah.
What motivated you? Were a journalist,
Mm-hmm.
and so what motivated you to want to get into helping the city?
Yeah. Some people come to the issue later in life. I came really early, and I mean, it was really sort of around 12, 13 years old when I thought I want to be mayor of Minneapolis. And, because I've been asked that question, because I wrote a book about it and all that, I had to think about that a lot. And it became pretty clear to me after I, really focused on that, that a big part of the reason that I got to this so early was I was raised in a situation where I was kind of straddling a different set of lines. I grew up in this middle-class neighborhood in South Minneapolis, and my parents ran a corner store. They were solidly middle class, not rich or poor, but they took, most of their money and put us into a school, BRAC, that they thought would help get us into college. My mother had never gone to college. That was her big deal. So all their money went there. But my father's drugstore was at Chicago and Franklin, which was at that point a pretty tough place. So at an early age, especially once my father died and my mom was running the store and we'd go to the basement of the store and do our homework after work, I would have days that would be, you wake up in the middle class, you go to school with a bunch of people richer than you, you go to the drugstore where there are a bunch, in a neighborhood where most of the kids had a lot less than me. We'd deliver prescriptions around the neighborhood. I'd kind of see what houses were like for kids my age, and it wasn't pretty. And then I go back the next day through all of that. And now we describe that as, understanding where you are on your continuum of privilege. To me, it just meant that my days showed me that everybody didn't get to live the life I had. And some had a lot, and some had a lot less. And I began to, I think in my head, begin to ask these questions about what's fair or not, and how I wanted to fix that. And that's really about the time I started to get this really bizarre idea I wanted to be mayor. And then Watergate came along, and I saw the incredible things that journalism could do, so I wanted to do that too. So I went away to college with the idea that I was going to come back and I was going to be a journalist for the Star Tribune, writing about cities and architecture, and I was going to become mayor. And through a lot of stuff, I got to do both of those.
Wow.
Which was, I mean, it wasn't simple, but that all happened. And the problem is when you get when you have a dream as a kid, you need to know what happens before you wake up. So I had this dream, but then, okay, so I did those. Now what? So the beautiful thing now is I'm in this period of time where, I've had my name attached to things and been on lawn signs and, the person who always gave the speech and all of that. And so I've got that out of my system. And now I can focus more on just getting stuff done. And I find right now with the Minneapolis Foundation, I can go deeper on issues. I could be working on making things better for kids or creating more jobs for those most in need when I was mayor, but things happen. Bridges collapse, tornadoes hit North Minneapolis, cops, community made something happen. So you don't control your agenda. Mm-hmm. So now I control my agenda to a much larger degree. So I get to work on the same things, go deeper, and do it in partnership with a lot of folks. So it's kind of a sweet situation.
Well, it was sweet for the nation, too, because you became the co-chair of the Democratic National Committee, correct? Yeah. And you got a lot done.
Well, that was an interesting experience. I wasn't necessarily a professional Democrat. I was a big Obama guy. I was the first mayor in the country to endorse him. So he appointed me to that. And it was sort of an unusual period because it was really fun to get to, go on and help make his administration more successful. When you get in the middle of all those party politics, I think you mentioned to me off the air that you went to the same high school as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who'd been a chair of the Democratic National Committee, and I wasn't very pleased with the way she did things. So that was kind of an interesting experience of getting in the belly of the beast. I'm not nuts about inter-party politics. I'm interested in closing gaps that we have, about seeing people as assets, not deficits. I don't like the fact that we're so fractured right now. And I think one of the things that's really good about being a mayor is it really didn't matter what party someone was. It was much more important to just solve the problem. And I think sometimes these days we wind up seeing labels instead of solutions. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, a challenge for me. So I don't miss the sort of that piece of it, the whole partisan thing.
Yeah. was going to say, I did not go to high school with Debbie.
No, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she, that would make her 80 years old now. No, I went to the same high school in New York that she went to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
But
Sorry.
many years before Debbie was probably born,
Right.
and there was Forest Hills High School is where
Yeah.
it was. But
I lived in the same city as Hubert Humphrey, but we weren't contemporaries.
that's right. He also was wonderful to me. I write about him in the book too. Yeah.
You know, my father was a pharmacist. He ran the Walgreens at 9th and Nicollet. Was his first big job in Minneapolis, and Humphrey was a pharmacist. So my father, I think, is one of the 4 zillion people in Minneapolis who said they had a close personal relationship with Hubert Humphrey. Who I don't know how he did that, because everybody. I mean, where did you meet him?
Well, I first met him when I was program director of a TV station in Seattle, and that was in 1965.
Oh.
And he was giving a speech, and I knew Warren Magnuson, the senator from Washington State. So we first met, and I get back here to the Twin Cities in 1970. And I mean, he had written me so many personal letters and everything else. Barry, how are you?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you remember my name?
I know, it was really.
Oh, he was incredible.
These are incredible stories. When I got to got elected mayor, I thought, well, geez, this is the office that Hubert Humphrey had. So I assumed, you look at Minneapolis City Hall, it's like this huge, historic building. I thought somewhere I know there's this like attic or some door I'm going to open. I'm going to put aside the dust and all of that, and suddenly here will be Hubert Humphrey's desk, and I'll bring it in. So I looked all over City Hall, thinking that there was something from Hubert Humphrey left because he was mayor. And I found this one little, side table that had been his office, and we sort of built a whole conference room around that little thing.
Right,
yeah, but there's very little physically left of him in Minneapolis City Hall. There's a statue out front. But the thing people don't remember as often is what a good job he did as mayor. He was only there for a very short period of time, but the city was having a lot of issues with corruption and with racism and anti-Semitism. And he really took those on, and there was an assassination attempt on him. Once I was just reading about this like a couple of weeks ago, which I didn't know, and he's really played a gutsy role in that.
Oh, he was phenomenal man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was honored to MC Vice President Mondale's inaugural banquet in Washington, D.C.
That must have been great.
In 1977 at the Washington Hilton, and I got to introduce Vice President Humphrey. It was 1 year to the day before he died.
Wow.
And I described how many instances in which he played a role in my life.
Yeah.
And one of them was the night that President Kennedy, or the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. I was driving back home. I was living in Idaho Falls at the time. I also had been a speech doctor for Senator Frank Church, so I was.
I loved Frank Church.
Yeah, well, he
was great.
He arranged an interview for me to do an interview with President Truman, which is in the book too.
Oh, cool.
So anyway, I was driving back home from actually visiting friends in Yuma, Arizona, and so I had to stop in Las Vegas briefly, and I told my wife, I said, I'm driving all night. This is an important night. I'll never forget it. I was driving through southern Idaho, almost home, and here I hear, he was Senator Humphrey then, with Senator John Pastore talking about presidential succession. And Hubert's calmness, trying to calm the country.
Yeah,
this is at 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And his calming words made it, it'll never be acceptable, but at least palatable to say, okay, we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
And well, you know how he was. Everybody, I mean, he was just so positive, and so what a role model.
Yeah. And it's interesting because growing up, like I came out of high school in 1974, I think. And I was pretty politically active. So during that period of time, there was the whole Vietnam era and a lot of anti-war work. So as I was coming of age politically, I was more in line with Gene McCarthy, who was much more about getting out of Vietnam than Humphrey. And so the frame I had of Humphrey was historic, good, but boy, wrong on Vietnam, which, he was nowhere nearly wrong eventually. But I think for a lot of us, it took a while to kind of understand the whole sweep of this guy's life and career. And there's this wonderful documentary that KTCA did about him. And at the end of it, I swear it goes for 5 minutes, it's a list of all of the legislation he passed. And when you think about having a Senate now, and certainly a House of Representatives that can't seem to pass a darn thing, and this guy, voting rights and humanitarian program, I mean, on and on and on and on and on. It's really, truly remarkable. And so I think it's really helpful when you judge the work of political leaders to judge them of their time, but also allow yourself to come back and revisit that, because I think some of the very, very best are ones who were not necessarily completely appreciated in their time, but they're doing the long work. And I think the way we consume political work sometimes and public work that elected officials do on other people's behalf is about a news cycle, and that's just not the way to do it.
No, I think what's lacking today so much, we may have one or two statesmen in office, but not many. You mentioned Gene McCarthy. Living in Washington, D.C. and being on television in D.C. allowed me a lot of privileges to meet even more people.
Right. You must have seen a ton of them.
And Gene McCarthy was my tennis partner more than once, about 4 or 5 times I'll never forget it, he introduced me to this girl he knew who was the secretary to the governor of Puerto Rico. And so she was based in D.C. for whatever reason, and so we all played tennis together.
Wow.
On Saturday mornings. It was
so
funny.
Of those sort of political leaders you've met, who impressed you more than you thought? Like, who kind of went under the radar who you look back on now?
Wow.
Like, I would say a Frank Church, for instance.
Well,
you
Church
mentioned
was
the
phenomenal.
and did great work fighting this, overreach of CIA and all this kind of stuff. But who?
I don't know if you believe in zodiacs. You and I are the same zodiac sign as Frank Church. He was a Leo too.
Oh, see, I'm a Scorpio.
Oh, I thought you were a Leo.
No, but the thing about, I don't go that far down. Yes, this is a good chance to show Barry's book.
No, I thought you were a Leo. I thought you were a Leo. Anyway, so talking about zodiac signs, Hubert Humphrey and Donald Trump are the same zodiac sign. So that means you should never believe in zodiacs.
Okay, go ahead.
The heck with it.
Well, I'm a Scorpio, okay, so I sort of look around. I read these things every once in a while for amusement, but when you say I'm a Scorpio, people who are really into it will go, oh. It's like, what does that mean? So I don't know what means about Scorpios, but apparently it's dangerous.
Scorpio men are terrific. They're great. I'm not saying it to be solicitous. It's true. It's true. You're great thinkers.
Why don't you tell that to all the women who wouldn't go out with me for years and years and years?
Yeah.
My wife is...
See what you missed?
See, Megan, Scorpios are really good people.
Well, getting back to your question, the one who impressed me the most was the brother of my former boss in Las Vegas. The guy's name was Paul Laxalt.
Oh,
and Paul,
he was a big Reagan friend, wasn't he?
He was Ronald Reagan's kingmaker.
Yeah.
And then both the governorship of California and being president, he was Reagan's campaign chairman for the presidency.
Yeah.
Well, when we moved to Washington, D.C., Paul had become a senator from Nevada. And his birthday had 1 day before mine. That's the only thing I know. Also, which is Barack Obama's birthday, Paul Laxalt. That's another thing to not believe in zodiacs, because they're the extreme opposite.
Well, neither one, forget the politics, neither one of them was they were sort of a more intellectual and not necessarily calling big bunches of attention to themselves,
Which is true.
Yeah.
But anyway, Paul and I, after he became senator, we were living there. He called me one day. He said, "Barry, I want to play tennis with you. come over to the McLean Racket Club this Saturday and we'll do it. So to make a long story short, there was another fun sidebar story too, which we don't have time to tell. Anyway, after the tennis, we're out on the patio having iced tea, and there was a senator from Pennsylvania, I can't remember who it was, and some other guy, and myself and Paul. And so Paul said to me, he said, if you weren't in broadcasting, what would you like to do? I said, Paul, truthfully, I always wanted your job.
Oh.
I've always wanted to be governor of Nevada. I loved the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
It was fun to live, or fun where to live. So anyway, Paul said, in all seriousness, he said, Barry, you move back to Las Vegas for 2 years, and I will make certain you are governor of Nevada.
So why didn't you do it?
Scared the heck out of me.
Did it?
I could see the marionette strings and me dancing
Yeah.
to whatever tune they wanted me.
Yeah, that would have been interesting with him. Okay, so I believe this is Barry announcing he's running for governor of Minnesota. So
Absolutely.
yeah, good. This would work, wouldn't it?
There goes the state.
Yeah.
So
You could have a
anyway,
heck of a lot of fun for a few years. What would you do if you were governor?
oh my goodness, there's so much to do. I mean, the state is so incredible. It would never happen, but just to make sure that people treated people more nicely.
Boy,
Treated people
that's
better.
a really great, clear thing right now. I mean, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
can we just all kind of
We're all human
chill
beings.
out and be nice to each
We're
other for a
just
little bit?
human beings. You know, and I mean, me in my 80s now, I recognize it more and more. And I become like these kids who have marched, by the time this airs, will have marched in D.C. to help save lives in schools, et cetera. Here in Minnesota, we have such a stellar reputation for being such a wonderful state, wonderful people, but guess what? We have problems too.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have about another minute. So anything else people should know about R.T. Rybak? How about, are you going to run again for any office, do you think?
I am definitely running the Minneapolis Foundation.
Oh, okay.
And I love the foundation, and I hope if people want to do something good in this community, they give us a call at the Minneapolis Foundation, and we could help connect them with good places to do that.
Okay, well, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, including myself, who say, hey, you know, there are some offices I think you would be
Well,
fantastic
that's nice.
for. How about governor of Minnesota?
Yeah. Well, you and I could run as a ticket. How's that, Barry? We'll do
Wow.
that. Yeah.
Well, you'd lose for
Yeah.
sure. I'd be the losing part. But thanks for your wonderful thoughts.
Thanks.
Well, again, R.T. Ryback, thank you so much.
Thank you, Barry.
What a
See ya.
joy.
Yeah.
Thanks you. And now it's time for the shameless plug.
Okay.
Yes, the audience is oh, buy this book. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Wow. He said buy this book. You can buy it on Amazon. And there are a lot of stories in here. And we were talking about Vice President Mondale. He is one of the ones who endorsed it on the back, and along with Sam Donaldson and Rudy Maxa and several others for whom I'm very grateful, and very grateful for R.T. Rybak coming today. We have lots more coming up on our shows in the future, and with people who hopefully will be of interest to you. So until next time, thanks for watching.